We only went on a few dates, but I just knew he'd be a good father, so I told him the baby was his. He was never supposed to be the one. Just a few casual dates, nothing serious, until I saw something in him, something that made me believe he'd be a good father. So when I found out I was pregnant, I told him the baby was his, even though I wasn't sure. He stepped up in ways I never imagined. But one unexpected visitor, a hidden past, and a photo sent by someone watching us shattered everything. What started as a harmless lie spiraled into a truth none of us were ready for. Stay till the end, because this story only gets deeper. I didn't expect much when I matched with James. He was sweet, a little awkward, and definitely not my usual type. We went on a few casual dates, coffee shops, walks in the park, simple things. Nothing serious. But still, there was something about him. Maybe it was the way he talked about his little niece with so much love, or how he always held the door for strangers without thinking twice. Something quiet and kind in him made me pause. And somewhere deep down, even though we hadn't known each other long, I thought, he'd make a really good father someday. I know how crazy that sounds. We weren't in a relationship. We were barely even dating. But life has a way of throwing you into moments you're never ready for. A few weeks after I stopped seeing James, I found out I was pregnant. The timing, the situation, it didn't add up in a neat or simple way. I wasn't sure who the father was. I was scared, overwhelmed, and totally alone. But even in all that confusion, one name kept coming to mind. James. It wasn't about trapping someone or running from the truth. It was more like searching for safety. I knew James wouldn't walk away. I knew, somehow, that he'd step up. And when I told him, his face changed, not with anger or shock, but with this deep, quiet stillness. He didn't even ask questions at first. He just nodded. And then he asked what I needed. Not what he needed, but what I did. But that's not the whole story. Because what started out as a choice made out of fear, turned into something else. James was more than I expected, and so was everything that followed. But what happens when the truth, the real truth, starts to crack through the surface? When you start building a life on a lie, even if it was told with the best intentions. Can that life still stand? I thought I knew the answer. I thought kindness could hold it all together. But then one night, something happened that changed everything. And in that moment, I realized that telling one lie, even a soft one, can echo louder than you ever imagined. James started coming around more after I told him about the baby. He never pushed, never asked for proof, and honestly, that made it harder. He just showed up. Every doctor's appointment, every weird craving at midnight, every time I cried over something that didn't even make sense, he was there. And the way he touched my belly, talked to it like he already knew our baby? That's the part that really got me. He acted like he was already a dad. No hesitation. No questions. But the truth kept sitting in my chest like a stone. I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe I'd never know who the real father was anyway. Maybe love and loyalty could matter more than biology. That's what I kept telling myself every time I looked at James and saw how genuinely happy he was. He started bringing over baby clothes, reading parenting books, even baby-proofing my apartment without me asking. People started calling him Dad before the baby was even born. And he never corrected them. Still, I couldn't sleep some nights. Something didn't feel right, even though everything on the outside looked perfect. I hadn't spoken to the other guys since before I found out I was pregnant. I didn't even know if he was still in town. I told myself it was better that way, cleaner. James was stepping up, and I was giving our baby the best chance at a safe, stable home. But lies don't stay buried forever. One night, James found something. I don't even know how long it had been sitting there, just a folded piece of paper inside an old notebook. I wasn't home when he read it. But when I walked through the door, I knew. I could feel it in the air. He looked up at me, and the way his face changed. I'll never forget it. He didn't say anything at first. Just held the paper in his hand, his fingers trembling slightly, like he was trying to keep control. I stood there, my keys still in my hand, heart pounding so loud I could barely think. "Is this true?" he finally asked, his voice low but steady. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse me. That made it worse. I nodded, barely. I wanted to explain, tell him how scared I'd been, how alone I felt, how I didn't know what else to do. But the words didn't come out right. They just made it sound worse. The paper he found, it was from a journal entry I wrote months ago. I forgot I'd even kept it. I'd written about the night I found out I was pregnant, about how I wasn't sure whose it was. About how I thought James would be a good father, even if he wasn't the real one. I never meant for anyone else to see it. Especially not him. James didn't leave that night. But something in him shifted. He stopped calling the baby, our little one. He still came to appointments, still helped when I needed it, but there was a distance I couldn't reach. I started wondering if I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. And then, out of nowhere, the other guy, Aaron, showed up. I don't know how he found out. Maybe he'd seen something online. Maybe someone told him. All I know is he knocked on my door one evening like no time had passed. He said he needed to talk. Said he thought the baby might be his. And just like that, everything I thought I had left was dangling by a thread. James. Aaron. The truth. And the future of the baby growing inside me. Aaron didn't look angry when I opened the door, just serious, like he had a right to be there. And maybe he did. I hadn't told him anything. I never gave him a chance to step up or walk away. I had made that choice without him. He stood in my living room like a ghost from a different life, asking questions I wasn't ready to answer. "Is it mine?" he asked, looking straight at me. Not accusing, just waiting. I couldn't look at him. I just told him the truth, that I didn't know. And of course, James walked in 10 minutes later. I hadn't expected both of them to be in the same room, not ever. But there they were, James, still holding on to what little trust he had left, and Aaron, just starting to ask for something I hadn't offered. The air between them was sharp. Tense. James didn't speak right away. He just stared at Aaron, then at me, like he was trying to figure out what this all meant now. And I didn't have the answer. Aaron said he wanted a paternity test. Said it calmly, like it was a logical next step. James didn't argue. He just nodded, jaw tight, hands and fists at his sides. But the way he looked at me, that hurt more than anything. Like he was seeing me for the first time, and not in a good way. The baby kicked for the first time that night. Right in the middle of all that silence. I didn't even say anything, I just felt it, sharp and sudden. And all I could think about was how one tiny heartbeat had brought 3 lives to this moment. A choice I made in fear had become a storm none of us could control. And the worst part was, the real storm hadn't even started yet. The next morning, I got a message from the clinic. They had a cancellation and could fit me in for the DNA test that same week. I texted both James and Aaron. James replied within seconds, short, polite, like he was just going through the motions now. Aaron didn't respond right away, but when he finally did, he said he'd be there. That whole week, the tension in the air was like something you could feel in your chest. James kept his distance. He still checked in, brought groceries, even fixed a leaky faucet like nothing had changed, but everything had. We barely spoke. And when we did, it felt like we were strangers again, like we were back to those first awkward coffee dates, only this time with way too much between us. But that wasn't the twist. That wasn't the thing that broke the ground open. 2 nights before the test, I was going through a box of old mail, stuff I had ignored when the pregnancy took over everything. Bills, flyers, junk. And then I found it. A sealed envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photo. It was grainy and a little out of focus, but the moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. It was a picture of me. Me and James. Sitting at the park, weeks ago. He had his hand on my belly, smiling. I remember that day, we didn't even see anyone around. But someone had been watching. And they hadn't just taken a picture, they mailed it to me like a warning. No note. No explanation. Just that photo. I sat there frozen, heart pounding in my ears. Who sent it? Why? Was someone following us? Watching my every move? The baby kicked again. And for the first time, I wasn't just scared of what I'd done, I was scared of what was coming. The day of the paternity test came, and it felt like everything around me was moving in slow motion. James and Aaron both showed up, quiet, tense, each standing on opposite sides of the waiting room like 2 pieces of my life that were never supposed to meet. The test itself was quick. Swab, label, done. But waiting for the results felt like a lifetime. I kept thinking about the photo. It was still sitting in my drawer, haunting me. I hadn't told either of them. I didn't know how. When the call came a few days later, I answered it alone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The nurse's voice was calm and clinical. She told me the results were in, and that the biological father was Aaron. My heart sank. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but hearing it out loud made everything feel real in a way it hadn't before. I told James first. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. Then he nodded slowly and said, "Okay." Just that. No blame. No anger. But I could see something had closed inside him. He stood up, kissed my forehead gently, and walked out the door. He didn't look back. That hurt more than I expected. I thought I'd feel relief, at least I had an answer, but instead I felt like something pure had slipped through my fingers. Aaron, on the other hand, was ready. He started showing up more, planning for the baby, wanting to be involved. And just when I thought things might finally start settling into place, I found another envelope. This time, it wasn't a photo. It was a birth certificate. But not mine. Not the baby's. It was Aaron's, and next to father, there was James's name. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. How could that be? What did it mean? Everything I thought I knew had just twisted into something darker, deeper, and now, I wasn't even sure whose secret this really was. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Some kind of paperwork mix-up. But the more I looked at the birth certificate, the more questions flooded my mind. Why was James's name on Aaron's birth record? I needed answers, so I went straight to the source. I called James. He didn't answer at first, but later that night, he showed up at my door. I handed him the envelope without saying a word. He looked at it, and I watched the color drain from his face. Then he sat down, quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and heavy. He told me the truth. Years ago, when James was barely out of high school, he had a brief relationship with a woman who got pregnant. She moved away before the baby was born, and he never heard from her again, until, out of the blue, she reached out to put his name on the birth certificate. Her new partner, she said, couldn't legally claim the child. That baby was Aaron. So yes, Aaron was James's biological son. They had never met. James didn't even know what he looked like until he saw him standing in my living room weeks ago. That's why he kept staring at Aaron that day, like something about him was familiar. Because he was. I didn't know what to say. All the lies, all the twisted truths, we had come full circle. Somehow, in the most impossible way, James had ended up in his own son's life, without either of them knowing it. In the end, we decided the baby deserved more than secrets. James told Aaron the truth. It was hard. It was messy. But strangely, it brought something honest between them. Aaron stayed involved. James did too, in a quieter way. And I started over, this time without lies, without fear. Sometimes, the family you build looks nothing like the one you imagined. Sometimes it's even more complicated than you can handle. But it's real. And in the middle of all that mess, one tiny heartbeat taught me the hardest, most beautiful truth of all. Love doesn't always come the way you expect, but when it does, you hold on to it.